We're going to start in 2 minutes. Let's wait for some more students to join, okay? 10:05 is my tops. If we're in the classroom, I start on the dot, 8 a.m. No waiting, okay? But I do understand some technical glitches and sometimes internet connection. It's hard to get in Zoom meetings, especially now that school has started for elementary and high school, almost everywhere else. My son is already on week 3. Students just started, a lot of students in the US just started on Monday, this Monday. My son is already working on his week 3, finishing his week 3. Okay, let's start. I'm not waiting anymore. Good morning, pharmacy. It's hump day, okay? We're almost to the finish line for this week, okay? However, like what I said, we always start Wednesday and end the Tuesday. Okay, I'll try to make my position better so that you can have a better view, okay? You can see on your screen reference that I like using. Okay, it's called Khan Academy. Okay, a lot of teachers in high school and most especially high school, okay, use this reference as well. When I first learned this was years ago, probably decades ago, not decades, but about 6 years ago. I started going through it and I started checking out what it has, and I found out the story about Khan Academy. Who has heard of Khan Academy? No? Okay, so I'll talk about Khan Academy later on, but I'd like to dive into the topic right now. Okay, so our topic is nervous system, and you have audio lectures, okay, that you're assigned to listen to. So this is not the first time you're going to hear about nervous system, but I pick, okay, when I prepare my lesson, my lecture, my presentation to you, I pick the best references for you to understand better, to complement what audio lectures I've given you, what ebooks I've given you, what textbooks you have, and what other resources I've given you. So I found this to be very helpful. I'm not going to go over everything because I review them, okay, before I show it to you. So I'll just get the most important part for you to have that understanding of the topics. Okay, I didn't realize there's 7 participants. Okay, good morning again, everyone. I've been talking and I didn't realize you guys are in the waiting room. So anyway, next time what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in waiting room instead of just floating right there. I'm still trying to get the hang of the new features of Zoom. But anyway, to those of you who just joined me, I want to make sure that you hear me. Can you hear me? Christine, Shauna, my Shauna, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So our topic today is nervous system, but like what I said, this is not the first time you're going to be hearing about nervous system because you have audio lectures that I assigned to you to listen to. These are my lectures from previous classes. So who has listened? I want you to be honest with me. Who has listened to audio lecture 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the nervous system? Hands up. Did I do up to 8? Did I assign up to 8? Okay, up to 8. Okay, which means tomorrow's homework will be 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, because we're not meeting. So 9, 10, 11, and 12, each of my audio lectures is about 30 to 40 minutes, okay? Sometimes I push it to 1 hour, depending on the topic, okay? I cut it at a very good time for you to have that good chunk, okay? But since now we're live, what we're going to do is I'm gonna reinforce the topic more, okay? I'm gonna highlight, I pick references, and I look at them, I study them, and I try to think whether it's going to be useful for you to help you better understand the topic. One of my favorite references, like what I said before the others join, is Khan Academy. Okay, I have a teacher account on Khan Academy, and I use it for my students so that it'll help you understand any topic better, okay? And I do understand that because I teach all of the classes, you get para-deaf with me. So I always say I have a guest speaker, okay? And sometimes the lecturers or the ones presenting in Khan Academy, or most of the time, are doctors, etc., etc. I get feedback from students. Sometimes they tell me, Miss L, that's such a boring talk. That's such a boring presentation, okay? So I get the feedback from students, and then but I always focus on the content. I always focus on content. I want to get feedback from students if you think that that's boring. The reason I want Khan Academy, I like using the reference, is because I'm not good at drawing, okay? And the presenters of Khan Academy are very, very good in drawing, okay? You'll know what I'm talking about. If this is the first time you've seen Khan Academy, I like using it for the different systems, understanding the basic about the different system. One of my favorites is the cardiovascular system. But for today, our topic is the nervous system. Like what I said, don't be overwhelmed. I'm not gonna go over all of these, okay? I have all of the presentations ready in my tab, and I'm gonna jump from presentation to presentation. But of course, I'm gonna pause and make sure that you understood whatever the topic is or was. So this particular one is about the nervous system, a brief description of the nervous system, or an explanation of the nervous system, which is the basis of all the innervations of your entire body, okay? Let's see. Please let me know if you can hear it.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about my bodily functions for the most part, maybe sometimes. But in the next few episodes, I'm going to be talking about all of the organ systems that make our lives possible, even occasionally pleasant. And to start it all off, I'm going to go straight to mission control, the nervous system.
Not all the nervous system, not all the systems, okay? Don't be overwhelmed. Okay, we're just gonna start with what he said, the mission control, which is the powerhouse, the nervous system.
Pretty much every single animal, except for some really simple ones, have nervous systems, which is great because it's what lets things do things, like have behaviors. It makes you the sentient living thing that you are. The whole setup here, your brain, your nerves, your spinal cord, everything is made up of specialized cells that you don't find anywhere else in the body. Most of those are neurons, which you've seen them before. They look kind of like a tree with the roots and the trunk and the branches. Neurons bundle together to form nerves, pathways that transmit electrochemical signals from one part of your body to another. So when you bite into a piece of pizza, I love it when there's pizza in the videos. The receptor neurons in my taste buds recognize I'm eating something salty and fatty and awesome, and they carry that information along the nerve pathway to my brain. And then my brain can be like, yeah, pizza. And then it can respond by sending back information through different nerve pathways that say, you should eat more of that pizza. And yet, despite what my brain is telling me, I'm going to try to not eat any more of that pizza. You wouldn't think that it's terribly complicated to know that pizza tastes good and to tell someone to eat more pizza, but it turns out that our brains and our nervous systems are crazy complicated. Your nervous system basically has a big old bureaucracy of neurons, and it's divided into two main departments, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central and...
Please take note, okay? I know your lecture packet is typed, okay, without pictures. So this is your chance to take notes, differentiate, and understand the nervous system better, okay?
peripheral. The central nervous system, basically your brain and your spinal cord, is responsible for analyzing and interpreting all of those data that your peripheral nervous system, all of the nerves outside of your brain and spine, collects and sends its way. Once the central nervous system makes a decision about data, it sends a signal back through to the peripheral nervous system saying, do this thing, which the peripheral nervous system then does. Both of these systems contain two different types of neurons, afferent and efferent. Afferent and efferent are biological terms, and
I discussed this in the audio lecture, okay? Without him saying what's the difference between afferent and efferent before we move on. Christine, you remember in my audio lecture? Afferent, letter A. Remember, I said that afferent. Away from where? Okay, Elizabeth, do you remember?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Afferent versus efferent. Afferent. Efferent.
Afferent moves the information to the body, and efferent moves it to the central nervous system, or out to the central nervous system.
Okay, you said afferent away?
To.
Okay, afferent to where?
The central nervous system.
Okay, let's type that and double check. Stormy, I'll get to you. Okay, afferent is toward, is that correct?
Yes.
Toward the nervous system. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, efferent, or efferent, okay, is away. Is that what you're saying? Okay, away the nervous system. Yes, Stormy.
Aren't audio lectures 4 through 8 about Alzheimer's and headaches? So it didn't go over. So we're not starting at the beginning of the.
Oh, okay.
Lecture.
So was it arranged like that right away on Alzheimer's?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go back and check that one and find that 1 to 3, okay, which is the basis, which is good. Okay, so Elizabeth, where'd you get the afferent and the efferent? It's from your career prep class, or did you jump audio lectures?
I jumped a couple of audio lectures and I was looking at my notes.
Okay, so I will double check. Were the topics jumbled? Remember, your lecture packet and your audio lectures are tied together, but they're not by the page, okay? So when I do my lecture, I start off with a topic that I think would be the foundation, and then I branch out from that, okay? So thank you, Stormy, for letting me know that audio number 4 starts off with Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll look into that, but this is good that you mentioned it. One, because there might be a glitch, there might be hidden files in my folder, okay, that I didn't know about or that I forgot that I hid, okay? And this is good because we're starting off with the basics by understanding the nervous system. What a coincidence, okay? How did I know? I actually didn't know that I have given you access to Alzheimer's right away, okay? So this is very good, which is, time to take notes, okay? This is first page of your lecture packet, and the next pages, like page 1 to, I'd say about page 5, okay? Yeah, Shauna said that's weird because she started off with Alzheimer's too. No worries now, because now here's the foundation of the nervous system. Okay, let's start. Let's continue. Elizabeth said afferent is toward the nervous system, meaning toward the brain and the spinal cord, okay? Efferent is away the nervous system, away the brain and away the spinal cord, okay? When you say toward the nervous system, it's from the body to the brain and the spinal cord, right? So that's your afferent according to Elizabeth. We'll double check, okay? Efferent or efferent would be away from the brain and the spinal cord, going to the body. Let's see.
They're horribly confusing, and I apologize on behalf of the entire institution of biology for them. Afferent systems carry things to a central point, and efferent systems carry things away from the central point. So afferent neurons carry...
Is that correct? Carry things to the central point. Efferent. He talks fast, okay? But I like this guy. He reminds me of my former student, Sean, okay?
Information to the brain and spinal cord for analysis. In the peripheral nervous system, afferent neurons are called sensory neurons, and they're activated by external stimuli, like the complex and glorious flavor of pizza, and then they convert those data into a signal for the central nervous system to process. The central nervous system has afferent neurons too, and there they bring information into special parts of the brain, like the part of the brain that goes salty. Efferent neurons carry information out of the center. In the peripheral nervous system, they're called motor neurons because many of them carry information from the brain and the spinal cord to muscles to make us move. But they also go to pretty much every other organ in your body, thus making them like work and do stuff to keep you alive. In the central system, efferent neurons carry information from special parts of the brain to other parts of the brain or spinal cord. Of course, if it ended there, it would be way too simple, and no good bureaucracy has just two departments. So the peripheral nervous system is actually made up of two different systems with two very different jobs: the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, this is where I'd like you to take notes. Why? I like doing that. The branches, okay, the trees, the diagrams. When I used to be a student, I'd always make this, okay? Because it's easier. I don't have to read the text as a sentence, as a paragraph. I make all these diagrams on my notebook, okay? So when I look at it, I already know peripheral nervous system is the efferent or the efferent and the afferent, okay? And then the efferent is the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. Let's continue.
Somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic system controls all the stuff you think about doing, like all the information coming through your senses and the movement of your body that it makes when you want it to make movements. So here's something interesting. Since we're totally in love with our brains as sort of the center of all being of ourselves, we think that all the information about everything going on in our bodies goes to our brains for some kind of decision. Not so. Sometimes, like when we touch a hot stove, the afferent neurons carry the signal hot to the central nervous system, but that information doesn't even ever get to the brain. The spinal cord actually makes that decision before it gets to the brain, sends a message directly back to the muscles saying, get your hand off the freaking stove. This bit of fancy nerve work lets the spinal.
Okay, let's do that. This is always my example. Did you hear this in the audio lecture, Elizabeth? Okay, so you didn't know that somebody used the stove. You accidentally put your hand on it, okay? So there's danger, danger, danger. Okay, you accidentally put your hand on it and it's hot. Okay, you weren't aware. So let's identify which is the afferent and the efferent. Since Elizabeth, you were right that the afferent is toward the brain and the spinal cord. Efferent or efferent is away from the brain and the spinal cord. This happens fast, split second, remember? So this is the stove, okay? Which part is the afferent? Which part is the efferent? Stove is hot. Accidentally put my hand on it.
Putting your hand on the stove would be the afferent, and removing your hand from the stove would be the efferent.
Okay, let's analyze that, everyone, okay? So she said, putting the hand on the stove is afferent, okay? Sensed, the hand sensed burning, danger, okay? Toward the nervous system, the body felt it, sent the signal to the brain, hey, there's danger. Hey, you're burning. She said that's afferent, okay? Taking the hand off of it is efferent. The brain sending the signal to the body saying, hey, there's danger. Put your hand or take your hand off of the danger. Who said that's correct? Because it happens so fast. It happens so fast, okay? Who said that's correct? Raise your hand. Afferent, you touched the stove. The body felt it, sends a signal to the brain saying, hey, there's danger. Brain responds real fast. Brain said, hey, there's danger. Take your hand off of the stove. Who said that's correct? Afferent, efferent, afferent, efferent. Who says it's correct? Hands up. Hands up or thumbs up. It is correct. Okay, it is correct. Good job, Elizabeth. At what point of the audio lecture are you at?
I think I'm on like 9 or 10.
Okay, that's good. So did you hear me talk about the same exact example?
Yes, I did.
The stove, I was asking the students, which is which? Because it happened so fast. The signal happened so fast. Okay, let's continue. Are you catching on at this point, everyone? Is it clear? Yes, okay.
Spinal cord make decisions rather than the brain, and it's called the reflex loop. So the other branch of the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic system, carries signals from the central nervous system that drive all of the things that your body does without thinking about them. Your heartbeat, your digestion, breathing, saliva production, all of your organ functions. But we're not done yet here. We need to go deeper. The autonomic nervous system has two divisions of its own, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the jobs that these two perform aren't just different, they're completely opposite.
Very important topic. I talked about this a lot over and over and over because this is part of basic pharmacology. That's why I wanted to go over this. Sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Who is on that part of the audio lecture? What did I say? How do you remember sympathetic? Stormy, are you there on the audio lecture part?
No, but isn't sympathetic the fight, flight, and oh my gosh.
Okay, most people will say fight and fright, okay? I always include the flight. Fight, fright, and flight. So you have to think what happens during a fight. What you have to think, what happens when you're up in the air on a flight or when you're paragliding, okay? What happens when you're frightened? Let's think about it. So that's your sympathetic. And another term for sympathetic is what? Adrenergic. Adrenaline, because there's a rush of adrenaline. Adrenergic, okay? Sympathetic, adrenergic. That's why fight, fright, and flight. You'll hear more people saying fight and flight or fight and fright, but I always include the three. So let's analyze or let's give examples. During fight, fright, or flight responses, what do you think happens to your pupils, James?
Don't they I forgot the term. They get wider, right? Or smaller?
They dilate.
Yeah.
They dilate, okay? They dilate, which reminds me, to this day, I can picture the book that I bought. I mentioned this in the audio lecture when I was in pharmacy school, because all of us are struggling with pharmacology. We found a book from the US. We didn't have Amazon at that time, so we had to order from a little bookstore and they had to import it for us. The name of the book is Pharmacology Made Ridiculously Simple. Okay, it's a black and white book, it's not colored. And then there's a caricature on the book, and because it's fight, fright, and flight, sympathetic, okay, the picture of the boy has spiky hair, frightened, okay, the eyes are big, okay, the eyes are big, okay, and sweating, okay, fight, fright, flight. Okay, and then if I'm in a classroom, I would draw the picture of the parasympathetic, which I'll be talking about next. Parasympathetic, okay, is your, another term is cholinergic, C-H-O-L-I-N-E-R-G-I-C. This is your rest and digest, okay? But before I go to the rest and digest, let's go back talking about more examples. So dilated pupils. Christine, what do you think happens to our heart rate during sympathetic response or adrenergic response? Heart rate is?
I have to be honest, I'm a little confused about this whole topic right now.
Okay, so sympathetic versus parasympathetic, sympathetic, adrenergic from the word adrenaline. Just think about what happens to you during a fight, a fright, or a flight. My Shauna, what happens to your heart rate when you're on a fight, fright, or flight response? When you're scared, what do you think happens to your heart rate?
Elevated.
Elevated, increased heart rate, dilated pupils, increased heart rate. Okay, so are you catching on? And then parasympathetic is your cholinergic. I said rest and digest responses. So I remember that book, Pharmacology Made Ridiculously Simple. Okay, and it has a picture of a pig by the beach with its hand on its belly, like it just ate, rest and digest. Okay, so you have to think about what happens after you eat. What happens when you're so relaxed? What happens when everything is calm? So here's the reverse of your sympathetic or adrenergic. Shauna, what do you think happens to your pupils during rest and digest or cholinergic or parasympathetic response? Shauna, can you hear me? Stormy, what do you think happens during rest and digest? What happens to your pupils? If it's dilated in sympathetic, what happens during parasympathetic?
Rana sent answer in the chat box. She said it goes back to normal.
It goes back to normal. Okay, so it's constricted. Dilated for sympathetic, constricted. What do you think happens in heart rate to your heart rate? Stormy.
It lowers, it goes back.
It lowers or it's normal. Okay, you see the differences? Okay, let's hear it from him.
And frankly, they're always vying for control of the body in some kind of nervous system cage match. The sympathetic division is responsible for like freaking out. You've probably heard this talked about as the fight or flight response. In other words, stress. But stress isn't all bad. It's what saves our lives when we're being chased by saber-toothed tigers, right? The sympathetic system prepares our body for action by increasing the heart rate and the blood pressure, enhancing our sense of smell, dilating the pupils, activating our adrenal cortex to make adrenaline, shutting down blood supply to our digestive and reproductive system so that there'll be more blood available for our lungs and our muscles when we have to like run. And even though you're not in a constant state of panic, at least I hope not, I kind of am, that system is running all the time, every day. But right next to it is the parasympathetic. Here, your brain, your nerves, your spinal cord,
no.
everything.
Where was I? Can somebody remember what point was I? Okay, not there. Let's find his. I was trying to pause it. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's see where he's at.
Prepares our body for action by increasing the heart rate and the blood pressure, enhancing our sense of smell, dilating the pupils, activating our adrenal cortex to make adrenaline, shutting down blood supply to our digestive and reproductive system so that there'll be more blood available for our lungs and our muscles when we have to like run. And even though you're not in a constant state of panic, at least I...
Okay, so I remember I said, people always say it as fight or flight response. Okay, but I added the word fright so that you can picture it better. So you'll hear me say fight, fright, or flight, fight, fright, or flight. But it is very common to hear fight or flight, fight or flight. But he mentioned when you wanted to run because you're frightened, okay?
I hope not, I kind of am. That system is running all the time, every day. But right next to it is the parasympathetic division, working hard to make sure we take it nice and easy, dials down the heart rate and the blood pressure, constricts our lungs, makes our nose run, increases blood flow to our reproductive junk. Our mouths produce saliva, encourage us to poop and pee. That's basically what we have to thank for taking a nap, sitting in front of the TV, going to the bathroom and getting it on. So consider.
Did you hear that? Rest and digest, parasympathetic, cholinergic. That's when you have to use the bathroom because you're so relaxed, okay? You're so relaxed, you have to go use the bathroom. That's when you feel like you have to defecate, you have to pee, okay, or urinate.
Consider yourself lucky you got both the stress response and the chill the heck out response working side by side. because together they create a balance or a homeostasis. Now, that's what the nervous system does. Next, we have to talk about how it does it. The neurons that make up our nervous systems make it possible for our bodies to have their very own little electric systems. So to understand how they work.
Okay, what's the neuron? Anybody remember? My Shauna, what's the neuron?
The cells in the brain?
The cells in the brain. It conducts what? Elizabeth. He just mentioned it.
I don't know.
It conducts, he said.
You have to understand their anatomy. Like I've said before, a typical neuron has branches like a tree. These are called dendrites, and they receive information from other neurons. Neurons also have a single axon, the trunk of the tree, which is branched at the end and transmits signals to other neurons. The axon is also covered in a fatty material called myelin, which acts as insulation. But the myelin sheath isn't continuous. There are these little bits of exposed neuron along the axon, which have the sweetest names in this whole episode. They're called the nodes of Ranvier, which seems like an excellent working title for the 8th Harry Potter novel, Harry Potter and the Nodes of Ranvier. Anyway, these nodes allow signals to hop from node to node, which lets the signal travel down a nerve faster. This node hopping, by the way, has a name. It's called saltatory conduction. Conduction because it's electrical conduction, and saltatory because saltatory means leaping. Finally, the place where an axon's branches come in contact with the next cell's dendrite.
Look at this. What travels? The messages. Okay, the messages. That's why I started off, and I want to start off with the afferent and the efferent. Okay, look at this.
Is called a synapse, and that's where neurotransmitters pass information from one neuron to the next. Now, think back to, or just go watch the episode that we did on.
That's why they're called neurotransmitters. Okay, neurotransmitters.
Cell membranes, where we talked about how materials travel down concentration gradients. Well, in much the same way, all of the neurons in your body have a membrane potential, a difference in voltage or electrical charge between the inside and the outside of the membrane. You might also remember that this buildup of voltage is handled in part by a sexy little protein called the sodium-potassium pump. Basically, the pump creates a voltage differential like charging a battery by moving 3 positively charged sodium ions out for every 2 potassium ions it lets in, creating a net negative charge inside the cell relative to the outside. When a neuron is inactive, this is called its resting potential, and its voltage is about -70 millivolts. But in addition to the pumps, neurons also have ion channels. These are proteins that straddle the membrane, but they're a lot simpler and don't need ATP to power them. Each cell can have more than 300 different kinds of ion channels, each tailored to accept a specific ion. Now don't zone out here, because all of this stuff is going to come into play when a neuron becomes active. This happens when an input or stimulus creates a change in the neuron that eventually reaches the axon, creating what's called an action potential, a
There you go.
event where the electrical potential of the cell rapidly rises and falls. When an action potential begins, like when a molecule of sugar touches one of my sweet taste buds, some ion channels open and let those positive sodium ions rush in so that the inside starts to become less negative. With enough
I want you to understand this, because this is important not only in pharmacology, but once you get to your IV part, you will understand why do we have to have all those sodium and potassium in our IV bag? What does it do to the body? Okay, this answers that question.
stimulus, the internal charge of the neuron reaches a certain threshold, which triggers more sodium channels to respond and open the floodgates to let even more ions in. That's happening on one tiny little area of the neuron, but this change in voltage creeps over to the next bunch of sodium channels, which are also sensitive to voltage, and so they open. That exchange triggers the next batch, and so on down the line. So the signal of changing voltage travels down the neuron's membrane like a wave. But remember, the myelin sheath insulates most of the neuron and just leaves those little nodes exposed. So instead of being a steady wave, the wave jumps from node to node, speeding up the travel time of action potential down a neuron. That's your saltatory conduction at work. When the wave reaches the end of the neuron, it triggers a release of neurotransmitters from the neuron through exocytosis, and those neurotransmitters then float across the synapse to the next neuron, where they trigger another action potential over there.
Did you see how it fires? Okay, transfer from one to another. What do you think happened to those who lose it? What do you think happens to those who lose it? Like that guy who went to the theater and started shooting everyone at that Batman movie. What do you think happened inside? James, you have an idea? Seeing that, seeing those fires, those firings. No? What about you, Elizabeth?
I think he wasn't getting the message. Somewhere along the nerve path, there was a broken pathway or a broken channel.
Possibly. Or it could be possibly firing too much. Okay? So those fires like that, it became, okay? Especially if you have a specific problem there and you're not on medication to normalize things, okay?
By this time, so many sodium ions have gotten inside the first neuron that the difference between the outside and the inside is actually reversed. The inside is positive and the outside is negative. And it seems like neurons hate that more than pretty much anything else. So it
This is important for our chemistry class as well, okay?
fixes itself. The sodium channels close and the potassium channels open up. The positive potassium ions rush down both the concentration and electrochemical gradients to get the heck out of the cell. That brings the charge inside the cell back down to negative on the inside and positive on the outside. Notice though, that now the sodium is on the inside of the cell and the potassium is on the outside. They're in the opposite places of where they started, so the sodium potassium pumps get back to work, burn up some ATP to pump the sodium back out and the potassium back in, and whew, things.
Remember, I always tell you, sodium, where there's water, there's salt. Okay, I said that in the audio lecture. So sodium is best friends with water. So when you eat too much salty food like chips that we love, there could be what? Salt retention. And when there's salt retention, there's water retention. Where do you feel that most of the time? Right on your legs. Your legs are heavy. Okay? If you eat too much salty food, why? Water retention. Okay? And that's what we call edema. I mentioned that during the audio lecture. EDEMA. That is water or fluid retention. And you got to remember, sodium or salt and water are best friends. Think about the beach. So where there's sodium, there's water, or where there's water, there's sodium, okay? Or salt.
We're now back at the resting potential again. So that, my friends, is how action potential allows neurons to communicate signals down a whole chain of neurons from the outer reaches of the peripheral nervous system all the way up the spinal cord into the brain and then back out again. So let's
Okay, so that was a good explanation. He just talked so fast. I know there's a way to slow him down. However, I'd like to get your feedback on this one. How'd you like him explaining? How'd you like him explaining the nervous system? The central and the peripheral nervous system, the action potential. Christine, you need coffee. I see you're somewhere else.
Yeah,
James has his regular zinc and vitamin C. How'd you like that explanation of the nervous system? Since you said I started an audio lecture on Alzheimer's, the one that you have access to. Did this clarify the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic for you, Christine?
a tiny bit.
Okay, it's simple. Okay, just think about sympathetic, adrenaline, adrenergic, fight or flight. Okay, I even added fright. Okay, and then parasympathetic is rest and digest. James, how'd you like the resource or the reference I used today to explain the nervous system?
I understood it better with the images. Just, I mean, I've listened to the audio lectures about that. I have to keep going back to understand it. But I guess with the images, it helped me a bit more, like to understand which like where the efferent goes and where the afferent goes, and then what the somatic and automatic goes and everything.
Yeah. So yay or nay on this reference? Because I tried to listen to you guys. Yay? Yay on the reference or nay? Yeah? Okay. So I will jump to the brain, okay? Parts and function of the fore, mid, and the hind brain, and then functions of the brain. Actually, because he discussed the neuron, the nervous system already. Can you see when I jump to a different screen?
Has your brain ever wondered what?
You see that? Can you see the picture of the brain? Or is it, I'm stuck to the same video? What do
No,
you
we
see?
can see the video.
Okay, perfect. Because I don't know when I share screen and I switch tabs, I don't know if it switches with, as I move on. Okay, let's see.
What the parts of the brain are and what are their functions? Well, that's basically what we're going to talk about in this video. So what you're looking at is a section of your brain. And to make sense of this, let's say you could see someone's brain from the top. Then you would be able to see the two hemispheres like this. Don't worry, this is not a brain. This is just a walnut. It looks very similar to the brain. But let's say these are two hemispheres. Now, imagine you cut this walnut. Then you look at the inside side of this one.
Okay, I like that he used the walnut to show the brain, okay? And walnut is a brain food. You see how it's related? It totally looks like a brain, and walnut is a brain food. So if you're studying for a test, you might want to snack on walnuts, not chips, okay? It is a brain food. So fun fact for today.
And you would see something like this, right? The inner side of one of the halves. Well, that's basically what we're looking at. It's the inner side of one of the hemispheres, okay? So let's get rid of that and look at the different parts. We can broadly divide our brain into three parts. The forebrain, which is this big yellow section. The midbrain, which is this tiny pink section. And the hindbrain, or the lower brain, which is this blue section. Usually when we say humans have big brain, you're basically talking about this forebrain section, okay? And then the midbrain is actually the beginning part of the brain stem. Brain stem is on top of which the forebrain sits. The brain stem connects the forebrain to the spinal cord. This continues as the spinal cord. So the beginning section of that brain stem is what we call as the midbrain. And then the later section of the brain stem is a part of the hindbrain, right? This is the hindbrain. And the hindbrain also consists of this section. You know, this itself looks like a mini brain all by itself, but that and the remaining portion of that brainstem is basically what we call the hindbrain. Okay, so what are the functions of them? Before we get into the details, to get a broad sense of what these parts do, we can think that the forebrain is responsible for all the voluntary functions, and the midbrain and the hindbrain together are responsible for all the involuntary functions.
Okay, when you say voluntary, you do it because you tell yourself that you have to do it, you need to do it, or you want to do it. That's voluntary, okay? Involuntary is your body or your brain does it without you ordering it. You understand? Breathing, voluntary or involuntary? James, breathing. It's hard, right? It's hard to answer. Think about it. Normal breathing, voluntary or involuntary?
Involuntary.
Involuntary, unless you tell yourself, hey, hold your breath. Yeah, but we breathe without thinking it, right? Okay, our heart beating, Christine. Voluntary, involuntary?
Involuntary?
Involuntary. Do we tell our heart, hey, stop beating? Hey, beat now, okay? Maybe when you're in love, you wanted to tell your heart to stop beating sometimes when you're too crazy in love. But no, it doesn't work like that. Anatomy and physiology-wise, we cannot control our heart breathing. I always throw those because I have younger and younger and younger students as time passes by. So I tease them like that. But anyway, so involuntary for our heart beating, sweating, Stormy. Voluntary, involuntary.
Involuntary.
Involuntary, you can't tell your body, hey, stop sweating, okay? I don't sweat very much, even if I run on the treadmill, that is a problem. I'd like to sweat more, okay? A little bit more, because sweat, you excrete some of the toxins in your body by doing that too. So I really have to go to a sauna to sweat it out, okay? I'd run and run, very little will I have sweat, because that's involuntary, okay? So involuntary. Elizabeth, can you think of something that's involuntary that I haven't mentioned?
Being able to come up with something on the spur of the moment.
Yeah, okay. So did you feel like twitching on your eye when your eyes are so tired? Do you feel that twitching? Sometimes that happens to us. That's involuntary. Okay? When your eyes are so tired. Yes.
Another involuntary would be keeping your balance. Balance.
Keeping your balance. You're talking about the inner ear. Okay, so yeah, that's involuntary too. Okay, looks like Jason is under the weather. Are you? No? Okay. So let's continue.
So when I say voluntary, think about all the actions that you carry out consciously by thinking about them, like to take a walk, or maybe to talk to someone, or decide to watch this video about brains. So all of that is from your forebrain. And of course, we'll talk more details about that in a second. And when I say involuntary functions, there are some functions that are happening in your body which are not in control, which you're not in control of. For example, your heart beating, or maybe your digestion, you're not in control of those, right? So those are mostly taken care by your midbrain and the hindbrain. So how do we remember which part does which? Well, the way I like to think about it is I remember that now what makes humans special is their big brain, big forebrain. And I remember that we have this amazing intellectual ability, right? Our intelligence. So forebrain gives us our intelligence. So it's because of that I can do all my thinking and all my decisions, and also I can walk and talk because of this. So that's how I basically remember forebrain controls voluntary actions. With this in mind, let's look at the functions and the parts in a little bit more detail. So let's zoom out a little bit, and I've made some space so that we can write more parts. So let's start with the forebrain. If you look at the forebrain, you can again kind of see two sections of it. The outer section, which contains a lot of folds, and the inner section. Let me shade that inner section a little bit darker so we can identify that. So the outer section, right, this big giant outer section, it's called, let me call that, it's called the cerebrum. Sorry. The cerebrum. This whole outer section, which I have colored with light yellow, is the cerebrum. And we're not going to look at further parts of that, okay? So that's the outer section for us. If you look at the inner section, we're going to look at three parts of the inner section, okay? One part, which is over here. So let me put an arrow mark like this. Then one part, which is a little below that, which I'm going to write over here somewhere. Okay, wait a second. Yeah, let me write that over here. And this small thing that you can see, that one. These are the three parts that we need to remember, at least for our syllabus, okay? So this one, you know what we call that? That is called the thalamus. Let me use this color, okay. It's called the thalamus. And these are all Greek names, okay? So it will not make sense to us. But I looked up, thalamus kind of means an inner portion or inner region. And that's basically what this is, right? It's the inner region of our forebrain. So the part that comes below that is called hypothalamus. So the next part is hypothalamus. And hypo kind of means lower. So it's the lower part of the thalamus, hypothalamus. And this last part, which we'll be interested in, this one, the small thing that you can see over here, that is called the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. Right, this part over here. Okay, so these are the 4 parts of our forebrain. So these are the only parts that we'll concentrate on. So let me just put them together. So this is your forebrain parts. All right, so what do they do?
What's a pituitary gland? I put that in your notes. Okay, what is a pituitary gland? Elizabeth, do you remember? What do we call the pituitary gland?
It is the master gland. It controls.
Correct. Why is it called a master gland?
Because it controls all your involuntary functions.
Okay, that's a good answer. Very good answer. Okay, that's your master gland. Hint, hint, wink, wink, comes out on major exams. What do you call the pituitary gland, or what is the master gland? Okay, pituitary gland. Okay. This one he's not drawing, he's using pictures, but there are other videos wherein, like what I told you, the cardiovascular system, he's drawing using a pad, and they're so good at drawing, and that's what I don't. When God showered the artistic talent, I was probably sleeping, drunk, or hungover. Okay, so Miss L got some of those when he showered something, some of those talents, but not the drawing part, the sketching part. Okay, I know how to draw a stick man, so I like using this references. So stay with me.
What are their functions? We don't have to look at the individual functions. We don't have to do that. But the forebrain as a whole, what does it do? Well, one of the things, like we already said, voluntary functions. But again, let's dig a little deeper. What does it do? Well, one of the things that you can think of is thinking. Right? And when I say thinking, I'm including a lot of things over here because there's not much space. Thinking, your learning ability, your speech, language, all of that comes from your forebrain. But what else? To think about what else your forebrain can do, take a look at this picture. The reason you're able to see this is because of your forebrain. You may be wondering, wait, it's my eyes, right? It's eyes. But the eyes send the signal to the brain, and it's your forebrain that does the processing, and that's why you can see it. Similarly, you can hear me right now because of your forebrain. All the 5 senses, you can sense them because of your forebrain. And so one important function of your forebrain is sensing. Let me just write that as sensing. Okay, what else? Well, you identified this picture, right? It's a puppy. Did you confuse it with something like maybe a donkey or tiger? No. The reason you can even remember it's a puppy is because of your memory, because you know what puppies look like and you can associate with it. So that also comes from your forebrain. Memory, learning, all of that comes from your forebrain. Now, when you look at this puppy, some kind of emotion came in, right? Like you may have felt, oh, what a cute puppy. You may have felt happy looking at it. Maybe if I showed you some different picture, maybe if I showed you some scary picture, you would experience fear, right? So all the emotions, they too come from your forebrain. All your emotions, including love. That's right, love does not come from the heart. In fact, fun story, the other day my wife asked me, hey.
I love that he said that, okay? Love doesn't come from the heart, okay? I always say, you know what? God put the brain here on top of everything so that it controls everything, okay? Anyway, that was cute, he said that. Okay, he's gonna say something about that.
How much do you love me? I said, I love you with all my forebrain.
Yeah,
you haven't spoken to me since, but it was worth it. All right. Now, besides these, there are also other things that the forebrain does. Some of the feelings that you get, like for example, the feeling of hunger, the feeling of being sleepy, thirst, or maybe, after you have finished a meal, the feeling of fullness. All of that also comes from your forebrain. Actually, that comes from this part of the forebrain, but we don't have to remember all those things. So these are some of the functions of your forebrain. So what's next? We're not going to look at the parts of the midbrain. It's a tiny section. We'll not look at its parts. So let's jump directly to the hindbrain. If you look at this brain stem over here, the bluer section, you can actually see two distinct regions over there. So one region, one lump over here, and one more here, right? So this one, let me use a different color. So this one over here, it's called pons. That's the name given to it, pons. Again, I know, little weird name. It's Latin, again, it means bridge. It's kind of like bridging between the middle brain and this bottom part. That brings us to this bottom part, which is pretty important for us. The bottom one is called, let me write that down right here. It's called Medulla Oblongata.
Okay, you remember this from your career prep? Medulla Oblongata. Mr. Jackson likes saying this, okay? And highlighted what Medulla Oblongata does. Do you remember? Christine, do you remember Mr. Jackson saying what it's for? Medulla Oblongata. More coffee? Jason, makes me want to go to sleep. I'm jealous. Jason, do you remember what medulla oblongata is for?
All I remember is from Waterboy, and it makes you ornery.
Makes you what?
Ornery.
Ornery. Okay, Shauna, what about you? You still there? My Shauna, do you remember from Mr. Jackson's class? What's the medulla oblongata for?
No.
Okay, Stormy.
Is it okay? I'm gonna cheat here. Responsible for
It's in my notes too. It's in my lecture packet too. It's in bold.
so it functions ranging from vomiting to sneezing.
Okay, so it has something to do with your what? You said nausea and vomiting of sorts, right? It is correct. It has something to do with nausea and vomiting, correct? That's a good answer. Okay, let's listen.
Okay, we're gonna look at its functions separately. And then you can look at this big region. Let's make it dark so we can see that.
Hint, hint, wink, wink, the medulla oblongata will come up on your test. Okay, that's why I'm asking.
So this region, which kind of looks like a brain on its own, is called cerebellum. Do not confuse that with cerebrum. Cerebrum is the biggest part of our brain. Cerebellum, that's the name given to this. So these three regions are going to be the part of our hindbrain. These are hindbrain. And since we're not going to look at the parts of the midbrain, this is it. This is all the parts that we need to remember. So again, what are the functions of the hindbrain? We already saw it's involuntary, but let's look at the individual one. Let's look at medulla oblongata and the cerebellum. These two are important for us. So what does the medulla oblongata do? Well, again, it controls most of the life-giving involuntary processes. Okay, so we'll say life-giving involuntary processes. I'll just write invol, okay? Involuntary processes. That means these are the most essential for life, like your heart beating, your breathing, digestion, all of those essential things are taken care by your medulla oblongata. Along with that, it also controls some of your reflexes. Now, if you've studied about reflexes.
There you go. Okay. Stormy mentioned nausea and vomiting. That's where the reflexes, that's tied to your reflexes. But let's not forget how important the medulla oblongata is, because it's the life-giving, the essential, okay? The essential, involuntary, like the breathing, he said, okay? Your heart beating.
Before, you may be wondering, hey, isn't that controlled by your spinal cord? Yes, some of them are controlled by the spinal cord, but some of the reflexes, like your sneezing, coughing, those are controlled by your medulla oblongata. All right. The idea is the reflexes are not controlled by your thinking part of the brain. None of the reflexes are controlled by the forebrain. That's why they're even called reflexes. But the medulla does control some of your reflexes as well. So these are the two major functions of the medulla. Okay, what about the cerebellum? It's getting a little crowded. I hope you can see them apart. So again, I'm going to put some division over here. Anyways, so what does cerebellum do? Well, cerebellum also has some involuntary function, but it's a little different. One of its function is to maintain balance. Balance. Now, what I mean by this is, if you want to do even the simplest of the simplest tasks, like walking or maybe holding a cup, these things requires careful calculation, coordination. You have to think about where the gravity is and all of those stuff, right? If you try to build a robot, it's then you actually see how complicated those things are. But we do it with ease. That's because of our cerebellum, because it is the one that maintains balance. And along with that, another major function is motor memory. Motor memory. What's that?
Motor.
Well, think of riding a bicycle. With the first time when you were trying to learn the bicycle, you are using a lot of your forebrain. You were learning. You were learning to get balance. You were learning how the pedal works. You were learning maybe how to do the tring and everything. All those things you're learning. But once you learn that, once you've done enough practice, now when you want to ride your bicycle, you don't even think about it. We say it has become our second nature, right? All things happen automatically. How? It's the cerebellum. It's this. That's what we call as motor memory. Another example could be, let's say when you're typing on a keyboard, if you have enough practice, you don't have to look down anymore. You don't have to worry about which keys are there. It just automatically happens. Motor memory. So all those things are controlled by the cerebellum. And you know how I can remember this? I remember this by remembering that, when people drink alcohol, it's their cerebellum that gets affected. Think about it. If your cerebellum gets affected, your balance gets affected. And that's why people who are intoxicated, they can't balance themselves. They will be walking funny and everything. They may no longer be in a position.
Well, when they pull you over, they suspect that you've been drinking. What's one of the tests that cops do? Do you know, Jason?
It was a combination of things, but usually, checking your balance.
Checking your balance is one. Some cops in the old days, they ask you to recite the alphabet, right? They ask you to recite the alphabet. It has something to do with memory, simple, okay? I'd say, would you like me to recite it backwards from Z to A? They'll never catch me drinking and driving because I don't do that. So don't do that, okay? Thanks to Uber and Lyft, drink responsibly, okay? So let's go back.
To ride a bicycle. It's actually one of the reasons why we say don't drink and drive, because your motor memory gets affected. So even the most basic things that usually we think it's easy for us to do, like while driving, that gets affected. All right, so that's how I remember the functions of the cerebellum. All right, so finally you may be wondering, what about the midbrain? So these are midbrain, right? We're now going to look at the parts of the midbrain. Midbrain also controls some of the involuntary functions. For example, when you shine light in your eyes, your pupils become smaller. That is controlled by your midbrain. So the midbrain also controls some of your involuntary functions, but we're not going to look at that. And this is pretty much it for us. Now, since this screen itself contains the entire summary, why don't you try pausing the video and then
Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to look at it. Okay, it's nice to be able to dissect the brain like that, okay, and know the different functions of each of its parts, okay. Okay, let's try this, okay, before I let you go for a quick break. While your mind is analyzing this question, your heart is beating and your stomach is digesting the food you ate. You're not even aware of such functions of your stomach or heart. Which part of the brain performs these involuntary life-sustaining activities? I see Christine try to, rub the forefront of your brain? Your forebrain? Okay, answer. They said C, C, C. C, Medulla Oblongata. Let's try. I'll click this one for you. Correct. Good job. Okay, next question. Okay. The peripheral nervous system carries information to touch, smell, sound to the central nervous system, where this information is processed to derive meaning and make a decision. Which of the following are components of the peripheral nervous system? Peripheral, remember, we have the autonomic, central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. Carries information of touch, smell, sound. Answer, and I'll choose it for you. Jason, you missed this part. I'd like to test how much you've retained in your brain. D, any more guesses? D, let's see if it's D. What was the answer? Check. Try again, which means it's not D. Okay, Stormy said A. Let's try A. Correct. Okay. Spinal nerves arising from the spinal cord are the component of the peripheral nervous system. They carry information to and from the spinal cord. Remember? Okay. So the nervous system, the central nervous system is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay. Next one. Did I check that one? Move on. Okay. A drunk person often loses balance as he walks. This happens because alcohol also affects the part of the brain that controls body balance. This is the last topic. Which part of the brain controls body balance? Stormy's fast. You remember this. Cerebellum. Good work. Okay. Last one. Okay. Identify the color of the three objects around you. Now think about the process through which you were able to do this. Obviously, the information about the objects was collected by your eyes and passed to your brain where it was processed. Remember the picture of the puppy? Okay. Which part of the brain receives and processes the information from the eyes? I'm going by your answers. You answered B, the forebrain, and let's check. Good job. Okay, it's nice to be able to dissect the brain like what I said and be able to know the functions of each of its part. It's very awesome. And this is a very good introduction to your nervous system before we start jumping to the drugs, okay? Like what I said, the way I do pharmacology is I start off with a review of the anatomy and physiology, the different parts or organs, okay, the system that the drugs affect. And then after we discuss the different parts or organs, then we discuss the diseases. After we discuss the diseases, we discuss the drugs that treat these diseases or help alleviate the symptoms of these diseases. So you can put them all together. And then it comes into like a big aha. Now I understand. That's why our students are strong when it comes to pharmacology, because I don't just ask you to memorize the top 200 drugs. We actually discuss and explain the different parts of the body that these drugs affect and the diseases, okay? So real quick, how'd you like the references today? Elizabeth, 1 to 5.
The first one, I thought he talked too fast, so I'd give him a 3.5.
Okay.
The brain segment was very good. I like seeing the pictures and the diagram, so I'd give him a 5.
Okay, so it's good to learn that. I really think that the first presenter speaks fast, but my son taught me that you can slow down videos by clicking on the setting and doing a 0.75 times or a 0.5 times. So next time I'm going to do that. Or if you want to review that, go back to that video, you can do that too. James, how'd you like our references today? The resources that I used today?
Like what Elizabeth said, the first guy was kind of fast, so I would give him the same rating at 3.5 or like a 4, because I mean he kind of went back and explained things. And then with the last guy, again, like a 5 out of 5. He was very thorough, and especially with the divisions of each part of the brain. So
Yeah, okay. I like the first guy because he's more human. Okay, more human. The words, his language is more relaxed. Okay, and I think sometimes being too formal. I'm not saying there's something wrong with being too formal all the time, but sometimes being too formal, it doesn't get the message across. Okay, so him being just like a buddy with that aura, I think helps the student. Okay, Christine, how'd you like both presentations or resources?
I thought they were good.
Yeah, so what's your rating for the first and the second?
Probably like a 3 and then a 5.
Yeah, okay, so both, he's so fast, so next time we'll try to slow him down or slow down whatever video we're using. Jason, you missed the first one, but you were on the second one. How'd you like the second resource?
I think he was pretty thorough. It's always interesting. I don't know. I've always liked the British Indian accents. So yeah, it was entertaining. Yeah, I can understand it could be a little dry using, a lot of, formal terminology, but, it was still clear and concise, and he, breaking things up into the different parts.
Right, so even if we don't have the brain, it's so nice. That's why I said I don't have that talent of drawing. So I really like using this references. Shauna, how'd you like the videos?
The first one, like everyone says, he was fast, but he did explain everything like good. So I would give him a 4 out of 5. And then of course the second one, 5 out of 5.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Stormy, what about you?
So I really like the second one, so definitely giving him a 5. The first one, the only thing that I had an issue with on him is it kept on cutting his drawings really short and fast. So I preferred him to stay on the drawings. Therefore,
Oh,
I could have.
do you think that's a connection problem? Because it didn't cut off on mine.
I don't know.
Yeah, it may be a connection, a streaming problem on your end, because it was fluid. It was flawless on mine as he was doing the drawings. What about you guys? Was the second one, did you guys have the same problem as Stormy's? No? Okay. So Stormy, it looks like a connection or a streaming problem on your end. How many people are on your internet right now? So that may be a reason. And you can always go back to the reference. What about you, my Shauna?
Pretty much the same. I feel like the first one was really thorough, but he was talking a little too fast. And then the second one, I enjoyed seeing the picture, the image in the label.
Right. Okay. I like your feedback because I listen to you guys. Okay. I know which references work for you, which ones to pick, what you like, just like how I ended up creating references for you, from ebooks to audio lectures to video lectures to an app. Okay. So when I listen, I help you better. Okay. It is important that you give me these feedback as well. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is, Math, I'm gonna send you on a quick break.